At 16, it was just a fleeting glimpse, the young man under the peach blossoms at the White Horse Temple, but I secretly placed him in the deepest part of my heart. 2 years later, an imperial edict declared me a concubine. The young man, flustered, presented me with a jade pendant for safety as a token of his feelings. His eyes red with tears, praying that I would live the rest of my life in peace and happiness. But on the day I entered the palace, I was rejected by the emperor and banished to the cold palace. My fate tragic. On my deathbed, I asked someone to let me see him one last time. He looked at me with disgust. What are you? If it weren't for fear that you would enter the palace and take away Yin Yang's favor, do you think I would even acknowledge you? Yin Yang was the empress's given name. It turned out that everything had been done for her. I died with regret. When I opened my eyes, I had returned to the day he gave me the jade pendant. My rebirth came at an inopportune time. I had already been deceived by Yuezhi and taken to the back mountain of the Yichuan monastery. The face that had once captivated me in my youth now filled me with disgust. Where is the man who once captivated the world? He is just an ordinary mortal. I was lost in thought for a moment. And Pei Jingyun looked at me with concern. Mingzhu, are you feeling unwell? I turned away to avoid his hand reaching out to support me, lowering my eyes to hide the hatred in them. Pei Jingyun was stunningly handsome, with a sharp demeanor. Even when he remained still, he seemed like a sword sheathed in its scabbard. I feared he might notice something amiss, so I leaned most of my body against Yuezhi, using a handkerchief to cover half my face. Prince Pei, we are strangers. Please maintain proper etiquette and do not come near me. Pei Jingyun pursed his lips, his impatience turning into a lingering longing. He pulled out a smooth, white jade pendant from his robe. Mingzhu, this is the jade pendant for your safety that I obtained for you from the White Horse Temple. We are not meant to be together in this life. I only hope that you will live the rest of your life in peace and happiness. My gaze fell coldly on his hand. His fingers were long and slender, with thin calluses on the tips from practicing swordsmanship. But what he was holding now was not a token of his wish for my safety, but the blade that would end my life. After I was banished to the cold palace, my aunt came to see me. She slapped me across the face in frustration. Mingzhu, when did the girls of the Song family become so worthless? Before you entered the palace, you were secretly involved with Pei Jingyun. Do you not value your life at all? I was struck speechless, tears streaming down my face. My aunt tore off the jade pendant from my waist and threw it at my face with all her strength. Pei Jingyun is a womanizer. He had many similar jade pendants made, giving one to any girl who caught his eye. Only you dared to wear one so openly. My face burned with pain, but my entire body felt like it had been plunged into an icy hell. Trembling to the bone, I grabbed my aunt's skirt and banged my head against the cold bricks, my words mingling with blood and tears echoing through the empty palace. Aunt, Mingzhu didn't. Mingzhu did meet Prince Pei before entering the palace, but she never accepted his jade pendant. This white jade brooch was given to Mingzhu by Yuezhi. I had no idea of its origin. My aunt's voice was utterly despairing. Mingzhu, if I had known you were raised to be so naive, I never would have agreed to let you enter the palace. The Song family was reprimanded by the emperor's edict. As the leader of the literary world, your father has lost all face and has already retired to his hometown. The Song family's reputation for propriety and righteousness, for poetry and scholarship, is now utterly ruined. I gathered my hatred and slowly immersed it in a smile of spring breeze. In my previous life, I did not accept Pei Jingyun's jade pendant, and even left him decisively after he revealed his feelings. Yet that jade pendant was hung on my body on the very day I entered the palace, directly leading to my downfall and causing my upright father to harbor deep resentment. In just a few short years, he fell ill and passed away in sorrow. The Song family, which had always upheld propriety and passed down literary traditions, was now branded with the shame of failing to raise their daughter properly, and thus began its decline. Under Pei Jingyun's gaze, I extended my finger and gently pinched the jade clasp. Prince Pei has made his intentions clear. Perhaps he did not expect me to be so compliant. That the pearl of the Song family, a model of propriety, would be so easily swayed by him. A mocking expression flashed in his eyes. And his face, hidden behind his golden fan, was filled with arrogance. I smiled suddenly and turned to leave. Pei Jingyun, you are willing to sacrifice everything for Xiangyang, ensuring harmony between the emperor and empress and stability in the harem. I will not let you have your way. 3 months later, as the fragrance of lotus flowers filled the air, I entered the palace gates with great fanfare, accompanied by maidservants dressed in jade-green robes. In the Phoenix Hall, I removed my elaborate palace attire and gazed intently at my own stunningly beautiful reflection in the mirror. Even without any adornments, I was already as beautiful as the Empress herself. Moreover, the Empress Dowager was my own aunt. Even if the Emperor and Empress were deeply in love, I still had the strength to challenge them. No wonder she was afraid. In my previous life, on the day I entered the palace, I first went to pay my respects to the Emperor and Empress. When the Emperor looked at me with astonishment, the Empress casually pointed to the jade pendant at my waist. That looks familiar. Yueji lowered her head behind me. This jade pendant is the young lady's most cherished possession. She never parts with it. The Emperor's face darkened so much it seemed like water could drip from it. When he ordered someone to drag me away, the Empress, who was usually magnanimous and kind, closed her eyes, whether out of shame or compassion. I could not tell. A faint smile curled the corners of my lips, and my eyebrows arched slightly, adding a hint of alluring charm to my ethereal beauty. Empress, we will meet again. I wonder if you will like the gift I bring this time. That day, my mother took Yueji and handed over the signed confession to my father. My father cursed the Pei family for their treachery and threw Yueji at the gates of the Jinyuan Marquis mansion. With the words, "If I had known my son would become Pei Jingyun, I would have been ashamed to be his ancestor," he thrust the Jinyuan Marquis mansion into the spotlight of public opinion. In the quiet and elegant palace chambers, the lamps were brightly lit. I signaled to Cheongji to help me remove the hairpins and ornaments from my head. Rest now. But your majesty, the emperor hasn't arrived yet. Tonight, the emperor will be staying with the empress. He won't be coming here. The emperor, the empress, and Pei Jingyun had grown up together since childhood and shared a deep bond. The emperor and empress were deeply in love and promised to grow old together. However, after they got married, Pei Jingyun suddenly changed his personality. The wild and unrestrained young man began to live a dissolute life and became a womanizer. Therefore, amid the rumors, people believed without question that the Jinyuan Marquis' son was infatuated with a maid. Knowing the truth, the Jinyuan Marquis could not bear the guilt of framing a palace concubine, so he had to swallow his pride. He took Yueji as a concubine for Pei Jingyun and beat him so severely with family discipline that he could not get out of bed for 3 months. The current Pei Jingyun is no longer the dashing playboy who once captivated the capital. His reputation is ruined, and no proper young lady would ever marry him. He had fallen to this state for the sake of the empress. Therefore, whether it was to vent her anger for him or to save face for herself, she would stop the emperor tonight and give me a taste of my own medicine. Sure enough, palace attendants entered to announce the imperial edict. The palace attendants in the Phoenix Hall exchanged glances, but I slept soundly through the night, reassured by Cheongji's concern. When I went to the Jiaofeng Palace to pay my respects, the emperor was also there. He was leaning lazily beside the empress, his posture intimate. I bowed deeply, my manners impeccable, but the empress clearly did not want to give me any face. She lowered her eyes and said nothing, her gaze fixed on her teacup. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, whispers began to circulate among the palace ladies, and disdainful or curious glances fell upon me. But I remained respectful. My expression calm. The Empress could not be too harsh. So she motioned for me to rise. I stumbled slightly but quickly regained my balance. I raised my head in the morning light and smiled gently at the Emperor and Empress. This humble concubine thanks His Majesty and the Empress. The palace concubines who caught sight of my face gasped in astonishment. The Empress remained expressionless as she set down her cup. The young Emperor sat up straight instantly, leaning forward slightly, his eyes sparkling with admiration. Indeed, she was the pearl of the Song family. As the Emperor followed me out, the Empress's face darkened. After leaving the Jiaofeng Palace, I pulled the Emperor's sleeve and said mischievously, "Actually, my cousin didn't need to come with me to pay respects to the Empress Dowager. Mingzhu won't tattle." The Emperor felt a bit embarrassed that his thoughts had been exposed. He cleared his throat and explained for the Empress. Yingyang was unwell last night, so it was the imperial concubine who was inconvenienced. I easily believed his explanation and slipped my fingers into his wide sleeve, gently holding his hand. He paused for a moment, gazing at the eaves of the Shohua Palace, and did not pull away. The Emperor stayed in Shohua Palace chatting with the Empress Dowager for a while. Seeing that I truly had no intention of tattling, he finally left with peace of mind. "You're quite level-headed, not as foolish as your father made you out to be," my aunt commented. I saw the lingering worry in her eyes and couldn't help but tear up. In my previous life, I was confined to the cold palace, relying entirely on my aunt's support. However, after my maternal family fell into disgrace, my aunt resented Pei Jingyun and the Empress for framing me. She sought justice for me but eventually grew estranged from the Emperor. She was later sent to the imperial temple under the pretext of praying for the late Emperor and passed away shortly thereafter. My aunt paused. "There's no need to cry. I know you've suffered. Among the 4 daughters of the Song family, your 3 older sisters are renowned for their talent and learning throughout the capital. Only you stand out for your beauty." The Emperor wished to select a Song family daughter for the palace, and Xia Yingyang likely thought you would be the easiest to handle. So she chose you. Mingzhu, you are beautiful and innocent. In the harem, these are both your strengths and weaknesses. Do not worry. The Song family does not need you to bring honor to the clan. As long as you do not make any mistakes, your aunt will protect you. She patted my hand meaningfully. The Empress has always been arrogant and self-righteous. Mingzhu, just be yourself. For 3 consecutive days, the Emperor stayed in the Empress's chambers. The entire palace was watching my humiliation, also observing whether the Empress Dowager would intervene to reprimand the Empress. But they were disappointed. Whether it was the Empress Dowager or me, we acted as if nothing had happened. I followed palace etiquette every day, paying respects to the Empress with humility, and enjoying myself while reciting sutras with the Empress Dowager. It was the Emperor who felt awkward and went to explain to the Empress Dowager, "Yingyang has caught a cold these past few days. It was not my intention to neglect the Empress." The Empress Dowager dismissed it. Harmony between the Emperor and Empress is a blessing for the nation. The Empress has always been considerate. Since she is unwell, the Emperor should accompany her properly and not cause the Duke of Dinghua to worry. Mingzhu is young and innocent. She won't hold this against you. Shortly after the Emperor left Shohua Palace, he came to Maifengyi Palace. He brought only a young eunuch and did not have the palace attendants announce his arrival. He quietly hid under the peach blossom tree not far from me. At that time, I had my long hair loose, wearing a light yellow silk robe, and was excitedly catching the fat carp in the pond with Qiongxi in the backyard. Just as I finally caught one, before I could even celebrate, the fat carp leaped out with the momentum of a dragon breaking through the dragon gate, splashing me with water and soaking my thin robe. I looked at Qiongxi with tears in my eyes. Qiongxi's gaze passed over my shoulder and bowed toward the approaching Emperor. "This servant greets your Majesty." The Emperor didn't look at her but grabbed me tightly. His burning gaze was like a deep whirlpool. "Empress, I'm sorry I came late. Once there was a first time. There would be countless times. The emperor had tasted the sweetness and, in just half a year, I became the most prominent figure in the harem. It was said that the empress had argued with him several times, and the emperor had humbled himself to appease her. But she remained unforgiving. The most severe incident occurred when the emperor and empress had a fierce argument, and the emperor left the Jiaofeng palace in a rage, while the empress threw precious jewels and porcelain to the ground. When he arrived at the Fengyi palace, he was already exhausted. I lit a calming incense stick, coaxed him to drink a bowl of sweet soup with soft words, and massaged his shoulders and neck without disturbing him. The emperor furrowed his brows and, after a long time, asked me, "How did the empress become like this? She has always been graceful and well-mannered. Why has her temper become so volatile lately?" I knew he wasn't seeking an answer from me, he was simply seeking comfort. Sure enough, he sighed deeply. "Mingzhu, you are the most comforting presence in the Phoenix Hall." The summer night was long and scorching. I felt like a lotus flower swaying in the rain, growing more vibrant in the turbulent waters. When the emperor left, his steps were hurried, and his dignified, gentle face bore a hint of guilt. I peeked out from behind him. "Cousin, you look especially dashing today." The emperor stumbled, then turned back and smiled helplessly. "Mingzhu, you." After he left, I stepped out barefoot and coldly snapped the incense. During the season when plum blossoms rivaled snow, the empress carried a food box to the emperor's study. They spent the entire afternoon together, emerging later with laughter and conversation. That night, the emperor remained in the Jiaofeng palace. The silver fox fur robe that should have been delivered to my chamber was instead draped over the empress. When I went to the Jiaofeng palace to pay my respects, the empress held the fur robe and made me kneel for a long time. She had changed a lot since the first time I saw her. She was still as vibrant and graceful as a peony, but she was now covered in a layer of gray dust, and even the light in her eyes had dimmed. She and the emperor had been married since their youth, supporting each other through the years, their bond undeniably deep. The promises and sincerity of their youth were equally heartfelt. Yet youth is fleeting, and pure emotions inevitably become entangled with interests and rivalry, giving rise to calculation. 6 years have passed since the emperor and empress were married, yet no heir has been born in the harem. Despite the emperor's consolation, the empress has been driven to desperation by my overwhelming favor. After reconciling with the emperor, she began trying various secret remedies to conceive. Once, while playing chess with my aunt, I asked her subtly, "Is it that you don't want to, or that you can't?" My aunt's move took half of my pieces. Unlike my frustration at losing the game, her eyes remained calm. Deep feelings are real, but so are interests. Love can blind one, and the hatred born from love can cause one to lose all sense of reason, even to the point of desperation. Your advantage over the empress is that you do not love the emperor. My aunt's sharp gaze swept over my fingers. "Mingzhu, is that what you think?" I suddenly released the chess piece I had been clutching tightly, and my heart sank slowly. Yes. The disputes between the emperor and the empress grew more frequent. The empress's temper grew increasingly volatile. In her arguments with the emperor, her anger often spilled over onto others. Many favored concubines were wrongfully punished by her. Some made to copy scriptures, others forced to kneel. The entire harem was filled with complaints. As for my phoenix pavilion, the emperor had not visited for a long time. Cheongji would often call out to me as I stood by the window, lost in thought. "Your Highness, do not wait any longer. The empress has forbidden the emperor from coming to see you." And she argued with him for a long time. The emperor has agreed. I waited day after day, and Cheongji repeated her words day after day. Finally, on the day when the lotus flowers were in full bloom, she fell silent. She bowed deeply toward the emperor bathed in the setting sun and quickly retreated. Tears welled up in my eyes as I rushed forward. The young emperor, weary yet gentle, gently patted my back. I smiled through my tears, took his hand, and entered the inner chambers. I did not ask him why he had not come for so long, nor did I complain about anything. I simply clung to him tenderly, lit an incense stick as usual, brought out the warm sweet soup that had been kept warm, and gently untangled his long hair, massaging it gently stroke by stroke. The emperor stared at me for a long time, then took my hand and looked at me closely. His eyes filled with emotion. He sighed contentedly and pulled me into his embrace. Mingzhu. The emperor spent the night in the Phoenix Hall for the first time. After I sent the emperor away, the empress came rushing over with a sword in her hand, looking fierce. Where is Zhao Yu? Tell him to come out. The sword glinted like autumn water, pointing at my delicate neck. The palace attendants knelt on the ground, and Xiongji was so anxious that she knelt and bowed her head. I replied in a soft voice, Your Majesty. The emperor has gone to court. The empress's expression changed, and a mocking smile appeared on her face. He deceived me again. He said he would never come back to the Phoenix Hall. Her expression grew colder, and her two delicate eyebrows twisted into murderous blades. With a flick of her arm, the small bed I had arranged was scattered in pieces. He said he loved only me. Yet the harem is filled with concubines. He said he would not favor others. Yet he took you to his bed after you entered the palace. Later, he went even further, sleeping with every woman in the harem. Zhao Yu, which of your words are true? I was so frightened that I shrunk to the side, tears welling up in my eyes, unable to fall. The empress, displeased with my appearance, placed the sword on my body again. Song Mingzhu, I thought you were simple, but I underestimated you. You entangled Yundi with a lowly maid, and Zhao Yu was bewitched by you, being summoned to the Phoenix Hall every few days. Her sword slowly moved toward my face. I should destroy your fox-like face. Ying Yang. Hurried footsteps echoed outside the hall, and the emperor's voice rang out from beyond the door. The empress and I turned simultaneously to see the bright yellow hem of his robe swiftly glide across the blue stone path. About to cross the threshold. Cousin. I grabbed my skirt and rushed toward the door. The empress's expression changed, and she instinctively lowered the sword pointing at my face. But it instead sliced a deep wound on my arm. Blood gushed out instantly, and I let out a scream as my legs gave way. The empress's expression flickered. She reached out to help me up, but was pushed aside by the emperor, who had rushed over. He urgently embraced me, carefully examining my wound, and shouted for the imperial physician to come and treat me. Finally, he looked at her with an extremely disappointed expression. Xiang Yang, look at yourself. Do you still look like an empress? The empress's eyes were red with tears. She couldn't believe it as she rubbed her arm, which had been pushed red by the emperor. Zhao Yu, you pushed me? You actually pushed me for her? The emperor didn't look at her and said coldly, Take the empress back to the palace. The empress's tears kept falling. She wiped them away while smiling. All right. All right. All right. Zhao Yu. I'll go. I'll go. With that, she threw the sword to the ground and ran away crying. The sword landed and pierced the emperor's clothes, and the palace attendants scrambled to clean up. The emperor's fingers were clenched so tightly they turned white, and his gaze followed the empress's figure, filled with worry. I grabbed his sleeve, cold sweat trickling down my pale cheeks. Cousin, rest assured, I won't tell my aunt about today's events, and I'll make sure the palace attendants keep their mouths shut. Even though the emperor and I have instructed the palace attendants, there are no secrets in the palace. My aunt eventually found out about the empress wielding a sword in the Phoenix Hall and injuring me. The palace concubine who was unjustly punished also took the opportunity to cry in Shouhua Palace. The Empress Dowager, for the first time, scolded the Empress in front of the Emperor. Emperor, I know you love the Empress deeply and have always done your best to love and protect her. You even neglected the palace concubines and took the blame for her inability to bear children to spare her sorrow. But, Emperor, it has been 6 years. You are 24 years old and have no children. You must think of the imperial family and yourself. Though we are not biological mother and son, you have been by my side since you were 6. We have supported each other through storms to get here today. And you know how difficult it has been. Because you have no children, many people below are scheming and harboring improper intentions. Over the years, you have been loyal to Xiang Yang and to him, the Duke of Dinghua. If they still harbor any grievances, it would be a betrayal of the Emperor's heartfelt protection. Emperor. Fortunately, the Empress injured Mingzhu. If it had been another concubine, how would you have explained it to their fathers and brothers? The Emperor remained silent for a long time before finally issuing an edict to withdraw the abortion potions from all the palaces. While I was in a daze, he came to the Phoenix Hall again. He summoned the palace attendants to ask about the events of that day, focusing on what the Empress had said to me and how I had responded. My responses were indeed normal, and the Emperor sighed in relief. Another palace attendant added, before stabbing the noble consort. The Empress had blamed her for harming her younger brother, Yun. His Majesty's expression turned a little colder. Yun's younger brother? Pei Jingyun? He's still around. He called for Cheongji. Do Mingzhu and Pei Jingyun know each other? Cheongji thought for a moment. Isn't he the crown prince of the Jinyuan Marquis who took a concubine from the Song family? After the Emperor clarified the details of the incident, his expression betrayed no emotion, and he left without a word. As Cheongji helped me tuck in the blankets, she seemed uneasy. I squeezed her hand. This matter remains a potential threat. Even though my father has handled it properly, there are still meddlesome individuals stirring up trouble under the influence of others. They said that someone as talented and arrogant as Pei Jingyun would never set his sights on a mere concubine who was only considered pretty, and that there must be someone else with whom he was secretly involved. When I heard this, I was in the palace hall peeling lotus seeds, picking out the bitter lotus hearts, and biting into the seeds, which were fragrant in my mouth. The remaining seeds were boiled into a sweet soup, perfect for calming the Emperor's irritable temper. Due to the matter of the abortion soup, he had recently been in a bitter dispute with the Empress. Xiang Yang was indeed a remarkable woman, though she had only slightly lost her influence. Pei Jingyun was already eager to clear the obstacles for her, even at the risk of his own future. However, this time, it seemed unlikely that he would get his way. As soon as the rumors began to surface, his father dragged the Jinyuan Marquis to the imperial court. In front of all the civil and military officials, he harshly reprimanded the Jinyuan Marquis for failing to discipline his son properly, leading him to act in such a disgraceful manner. 16. His father listed dozens of charges against the Jinyuan Marquis and his son. Finally, he resigned from his official position, stating that he refused to serve alongside the Jinyuan Marquis in the same court. This left the officials who had nothing to do with the matter in a state of shock, and the Jinyuan Marquis, who had been nervously trying to keep his composure, completely lost his calm. My father flung his sleeves aside and glared at the Jinyuan Marquis. I hear that Prince Pei has a book detailing his conquests, recording in detail when and where he gave which young lady a white jade hairpin to show off. The officials, who had been silent just a moment ago, froze, then bowed one after another, demanding severe punishment for Prince Pei and the Jinyuan Marquis. Everything was settled, and my father left triumphantly as the Jinyuan Marquis's face turned ashen. His ambition was to teach and educate people, and he had long since made up his mind to resign from his official post and return to Linqing to become the headmaster of Yuelu Academy. The Jinyuan Marquis was also a decisive man. Before the Emperor issued an edict punishing the Jinyuan Marquis, he requested that his second son, Pei Huifeng, born to his second wife, be appointed as the crown prince. The emperor agreed. When Pei Jingyun was young, he often blamed himself and resented his father for remarrying after his mother's death. It was Xia Yingyang who comforted him, took care of him, and treated him like her own brother. She had always been the son he pursued. But in his eyes, there was only his own son. To ensure his son shone brightly forever, he could extinguish other lights without hesitation. How despicable! He didn't deserve to be cherished by anyone. When news of Pei Jingyun's death reached them again, it was another spring. He was dead. He died in the military, killed in a senseless fight with soldiers. It was because a soldier had privately mentioned a lewd joke that indirectly referenced the empress. In a fit of rage over his beloved, he stabbed the soldier. He was then beaten by those who disliked him. When the crowd dispersed, he remained there forever in that spring. The Marquis of Jinyuan regretted his decision. He had been deeply in love with his first wife, and Pei Jingyun had been his most beloved child. In his grief, he stormed the Dinghua Marquis's mansion. But upon returning home, he was in a state of despair and rarely left the house. However, Pei Jingyun's death did not cause a stir in the capital. At that time, his son, the empress, had no time to spare for his life or death. After the palaces ceased administering the abortion potion, good news began to pour in one after another from the harem. No matter how the empress tried to stop the commotion, there were 8 concubines, both senior and junior, who were pregnant. Upon hearing this news, the empress sat alone in the Jiaofeng palace all night. The next day, her gaze was colder than ever. She did not glance once at the emperor who had stood by her side all night at the gate of the Jiaofeng palace. Her eyebrows and eyes, adorned with elaborate makeup, shone even more brilliantly, and her cold, elegant demeanor as she walked and sat was breathtakingly beautiful. Her beauty, as fiery as the sun, burned the eyes of the palace concubines and firmly captured the emperor's gaze, causing him to rush to the Jiaofeng palace immediately after court for over 10 consecutive days. The empress did not see him. The empress is likely to regain the emperor's favor. Qiongxi placed the cut flowers into the vase, her face filled with worry. I merely smiled without speaking. Regain favor? The empress has never lost the emperor's favor. The young emperor is deeply in love and nostalgic for the past. His previous neglect of the empress was largely due to the helplessness and compromises surrounding the issue of heirs. Unfortunately, the empress, deeply ensnared in love, failed to see this. She believed the emperor had already grown cold and forgotten his vows. She no longer trusted him. I casually tossed fish food into the pond, attracting a swarm of carp that swam frantically, their white bellies exposed as they fought for the food. The empress will not only regain favor, she will also conceive. Qiongxi whispered in shock. I turned and smiled. What is there to fear? Those who should be worried now are the concubines who are pregnant. When I was playing chess with my aunt, she looked at me for a long time. You don't seem in a hurry. But the other palaces are all vying to give birth to the eldest prince. The empress is already carrying the dragon's child, at this point. Thinking about giving birth to the eldest prince. Isn't that like wishing for a longer life? Months ago, when the emperor once again lingered indecisively in the Jiaofeng palace, the empress finally opened the palace gates. The usually stern empress softened her demeanor, wiped away tears, and reminisced with the emperor about their past, crying so bitterly that the emperor could not stop shedding tears either. Xianyang is not only Pei Jingyun's son, she is also the scarlet mole the emperor has carved on his chest, never to fade. She has returned with such strength that she overshadows all the other women in the harem. The emperor only occasionally visits my Phoenix Hall, most of the time. He stays in the Jiaofeng palace with the empress. I was worried you were too young and impatient. But you're actually quite calculating. My chess skills have improved greatly. I can now hold my own against my aunt for an extra cup of tea. A smile flashed across her face. Mingzhu seems much more relaxed this year. Unlike the tense and overly thoughtful expression she used to have. This is because Pei Jingyun got what he deserved. So Mingzhu is happy. My aunt fell silent for a moment. Pei Jingyun is nothing. The one who truly acted is still alive and well. Mingzhu, you must not act rashly. I twirled the chess piece between my jade-like fingers. Unconcerned. Since she is pregnant, the day she breaks ties with the emperor cannot be far off. Why should I be in such a hurry? After saying that, I paused. I raised my head to meet my aunt's solemn gaze. Everyone in the family is saying you're foolish. Mingzhu, I think you're too clever. When the emperor came to the Fengyi Hall, I was copying books. The copied papers were scattered all over the hall. As soon as I saw him, my eyes lit up, and I immediately dropped the paper and brush. Cousin, save me. The emperor smiled and rubbed my nose. Mingzhu, what did you do to offend the empress? You were punished by copying books. I couldn't tell him the reason, so I complained in a coquettish voice. It's all because my aunt thinks I'm too young and not steady enough. She's afraid I'll offend the other concubines and their unborn children. So she's keeping me in the palace to copy books. I clung to him and pleaded softly. Cousin, can you please ask my aunt to spare me? Since the empress has banned all palaces from paying respects, I only go to Shohua Palace once a day. The rest of the time I'm in Fengyi Hall. I don't need to copy books at all. The emperor merely smiled without responding. My water-green scarf wrapped around his arm, and my slender white fingers gently tapped his chest. My moist, lingering eyes reflected only his figure. The gloom between his brows dissolved, and his eyes shone like a starry sky. Mingzhu, you're such a teasing little devil. The emperor lowered his eyes and asked me, Mingzhu, do you want a child? I looked back at him honestly. Mingzhu only wants to be with her cousin, she doesn't want a child. Seeing that I wasn't just going through the motions, the emperor tightened his grip on my hand. All the women in the harem wanted a son to rely on. Even the empress couldn't escape this custom. Only Mingzhu was different. It was the first time I called him Your Majesty. He is already the husband of many and will one day be the father of many. I only hope that in the Phoenix Hall, he is merely Mingzhu's cousin. Since the empress became pregnant, she has been highly averse to the emperor visiting the Jiaofeng Palace. Every time the emperor returns from the Jiaofeng Palace, his mood is gloomy. As the empress's belly grows larger, the gloom between his brows deepens layer by layer, only slightly easing when he comes to the Fengyi Palace. I and the empress were childhood sweethearts. I neglected the harem and remained childless for 6 years for her sake. Even if she remains childless for life, she is still my empress and will become the empress dowager in the future. I have even considered adopting a child from another concubine for the empress to raise. But why does she refuse to understand my heartfelt intentions? Is having a biological child truly that important? My mother and I are not biological mother and son, yet we still have a loving mother-son relationship. Thinking of my aunt's fate in my previous life, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Of course it's different. If they were biological mother and son, how could he have allowed the empress to send his aunt to the imperial temple and so easily destroy her family? But I was merely a docile figure standing behind him, saying nothing, and he would always stroke my long hair and say, Mingzhu, you are the best. He repeated these words day after day, over and over again. Over time, those words were etched into his mind, making him believe they were true. The empress had a miscarriage. At 5 months pregnant, she suddenly began bleeding, and it was a fully formed male infant. The news spread like a stone dropped into calm waters, sending ripples throughout the palace, leaving everyone on edge. After the empress became pregnant, all her needs were handled by her own people. She banned the palace concubines from their daily greetings and rarely left the Jiaofeng Palace. Despite all her precautions, The child she had worked so hard to conceive could not be saved. When the emperor heard the news, he was in the Fengyi hall. He sat there for a long time, his cold, stern face betraying no emotion. He calmly instructed the palace attendants to handle the matter, as if he had anticipated this outcome. As he left, his shadow stretched long behind him, the dark hue blending into his imperial robe, making his expression appear even more somber. Mingzhu, I fear I will not be able to visit you for a long time. Take care of yourself. And if you need anything, go to your mother. I stood silently behind him. We all knew that the imperial harem was in turmoil, and the empress would certainly use this as an opportunity to stir up trouble. Even though the imperial physician had stated that the empress's miscarriage was due to fetal developmental issues, she still directed her anger toward the pregnant concubines in the harem. Whether it was the pregnant princess consort De or the always obedient Lady Han, both met their end under the empress's harsh interrogation, leaving 2 lives lost. Yet she was still not satisfied. She was like a demon returned from hell, eager to burn every person she disliked to ashes. No one could have imagined that the empress would become so deranged. Song Xinfei, Li Meiren, Wang Chongyuan, and Lin Kairen, all pregnant concubines, were summoned to the Jiaofeng Palace one after another. Their heart-wrenching cries echoed day and night, and they were eventually dragged out horizontally. The entire harem was shrouded in a massive wave of panic. The terrified Zhou Shufei and Xiao Meiren were protected by the Empress Dowager and moved into the Shohua Palace. The emperor, who had remained silent all along, finally spoke. Empress, enough. Your constitution is unsuitable for conception. The failure of our son to be born cannot be blamed on others. Do not involve the innocent any further. Innocent? Zhao Yu. They are all innocent, only I am to blame. Is that it? I truly regret it. Zhao Yu. I truly regret it. Yun Di once said that as an emperor, you could not possibly favor one person alone. Yet I believed you. How could I have believed you? At that moment, the emperor's gaze was icy cold. He was calm to the point of cruelty. Xiangyang, your Yin Di is dead. He died for you. The empress collapsed to the ground. The emperor swept his sleeves and left the Jiaofeng Palace, then confined the empress to her quarters. Court officials shouted for her abdication in the hall. The emperor, who cherished the past, stood silently before the gates of the Jiaofeng Palace. He was still protecting her. What deep affection! But the other concubines felt a chill in their hearts. Zhou Shufei, who had always been gentle, wept in the Shohua Palace. What about us? We are merely the stepping stones for their loyal love. The charges of plotting to harm the imperial heir and harming palace concubines were too severe. The Marquis of Jinyuan cried out in the court, saying that since his son Jingyun had deserved his fate, why should the empress be allowed to escape punishment? He knelt at the palace gate for 3 days without food or water, begging for justice. The emperor and the Duke of Dingguo were furious at his recklessness, but they were powerless in the face of the minister's demands. Just then, a play suddenly became popular in both the court and the streets. The play was called Peach Blossoms, and it told the story of a wealthy family whose main wife had no children. So the master wanted to take the old lady's niece as a concubine. The master's wife had a childhood sweetheart, a neighbor's younger brother, who feared that the beloved girl would lose favor once the concubine entered the household. He devised a plan to seduce the concubine's personal maid, intending to frame her for adultery using a perfume pouch. The handsome young man, with his fair complexion, sang love songs to his beloved, vowing to risk his life for her, all for a single smile. As I was engrossed in the play, the emperor arrived at the Shohua Palace. Zhou Shufei and Xiao Meiren knelt with pale faces, while their aunt stared intently at the stage with a solemn expression. I turned away with tears in my eyes. The young emperor, seeing the noble concubine's tragic death on stage, lost all color in his face. He strode over and embraced me. Mingzhu. Mingzhu. Don't be afraid. I will believe you. I will never let anyone harm you. He said. Not even the Empress. A single act of the play revealed the love and hatred of a pair of star-crossed lovers. Those who couldn't discern its deeper meaning saw only the tragic tale of love and separation, but those who understood it were left tossing and turning, unable to sit still. The first to be affected was the Duke of Dinghua. Soon after, he submitted a petition requesting the Empress's abdication. The Empress continued to reside in the Jiaofeng Palace, her daily life unchanged. However, the Emperor rarely visited her anymore. She was like a withered flower branch, like parched land deprived of water, showing no signs of life. She roamed the palace like a restless spirit, often lingering in the Phoenix Hall. Her eyes were like bottomless abysses, gazing at me with an eerie depth. Sometimes, when I turned around without thinking, I would be startled by her. Qiongji was so frightened that she cautiously suggested to me, "Madam, perhaps we should ask the Emperor for more guards. I always feel that the Empress may harm you." I did not agree. As the sun began to set, one of the earrings the Emperor had bestowed was missing. I hurriedly ordered Qiongji to dismiss the palace attendants and search everywhere, instructing her to focus on the carp pond. I went to the Listening to the Wind pavilion near the Phoenix Hall to wait for her. The pavilion was small, with vines and flower branches intertwined, and sheer curtains hanging down, allowing only vague outlines of the people inside to be seen. The wind must have picked up, causing the flower branches to tremble violently. I lowered my head. "Qiongji, I have been in the palace for 3 years, constantly favored by the Emperor. Yet I have not conceived. I heard that the imperial family has a potion that causes infertility, and just one dose renders one childless for life. Even if one were to conceive by chance, the fetus would miscarry midway." I hesitated to speak further. "The Emperor fears his aunt and favors me out of necessity. Do you think he might have mixed the infertility potion into the tonic he sent me?" "Qiongji, should I seek out a renowned physician outside the palace for a consultation?" When Qiongji returned, I was lost in thought, gazing at the pavilion. The swaying branches, shrouded in layers of sheer fabric, resembled beasts lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce. Her face showed signs of anxiety, but she relaxed when she saw I was unharmed. "I saw the Empress Dowager rushing past here earlier. I was afraid something had happened to you. Perhaps you mistook her. I haven't seen her today." I sighed softly. "Qiongji, the wind is rising. Let's return." When the Emperor came to the Phoenix Hall again, a palace made from Shouhua Palace brought news. Zhou Shufei had given birth to the eldest prince. I held his hand with genuine joy, and the Emperor, noticing my expression, finally calmed down. "Mingzhu, you are indeed the best." I merely nodded slightly, but my eyes sparkled as I congratulated him. The Emperor embraced me tightly, his eyes brimming with deep affection. "Mingzhu, will you be my Empress?" My heart ached, but tears fell from my eyes. I could not respond. In the raging storm, we were consumed by a madness that felt like living and dying in a dream. As the deep night passed, he kissed my eyes in the morning light. "Mingzhu, I love you." My eyelids fluttered, but I did not open my eyes. The next time I saw Xiang Yang was at dusk. She passed by me calmly, her eyelids half closed. "Song Mingzhu, I truly hate you." After saying that, she walked away slowly, never looking back. I, however, broke out in a cold sweat behind her, my face pale as I collapsed into Qiongji's arms. The current Xiang Yang overlapped with her previous life's figure, instantly triggering the nightmare buried deep in my heart. I had once told my father, mother, and older sister about my dream, but when it came to the cause of my death, I had only mentioned it in passing. I had simply died in the cold palace. But that wasn't the truth. My death was not that simple. In her previous life, Xiang Yang had eventually discovered the truth about the abortion potion through Pei Jingyun. Although it had been a decision made by the emperor and his aunt together, she had come to hate her aunt with a vengeance. The emperor did not want to sever ties with her, so he tacitly approved her decision to send her aunt to the imperial temple. But after her aunt's death, he regretted it deeply. As compensation, he wanted to release me from the cold palace. But it was precisely this decision that ultimately led to my tragic death. It was also at dusk when Xiang Yang, with a calm expression, arrived at the cold palace accompanied by several eunuchs. The pearl of the Song family was trapped in a quagmire. How painful! It was a grief and humiliation that could not be expressed in words. My cries and screams echoed throughout the entire harem, gradually fading away just before dawn. And that emperor, who had repeatedly claimed to want to make amends for his aunt and compensate me with a peaceful life, never once showed his face. He had abandoned his empress. He is a complete fraud. My aunt never knew I hated the emperor. She thought I only hated Pei Jingyun and Xiang Yang. But the person I truly hate with every fiber of my being is Zhao Yu. It was he who, without regard for my aunt's nurturing and support, killed her, killed me, and destroyed the Song family. Everyone knows I am innocent. Pei Jingyun knows. Xiang Yang knows. And even Zhao Yu, who seems so enraged, is in on it. But none of them care. I am merely the pawn in the emperor and empress's unwavering love. No one cares about my fate. My consciousness plunges into a chaotic dream, unable to escape the suffering of the past. I return to the moment of my death. I had long since lost all sensation, staring blankly at the faint glow of dawn on the horizon. I cursed at the corner of the cold palace gate where the yellow robe lay, Zhao Yu. I seemed to hear his response, his voice gentle yet urgent, whispering in my ear, "Cousin is here. Ming Zhu. Don't be afraid. I am here." No. I don't want him here. I don't want him. But no one could hear my heart's cry. He was still by my side, shouting to Qiongji, "What did the Empress Dowager do to Ming Zhu? Why won't she wake up?" He then shouted at the palace attendants, "Where are the imperial physicians? Hurry and summon them." He was so loud. I didn't like him at all. I don't know when, but I suddenly broke free from the bonds of my body and floated gently upward. My soul was still in the same broken state as when I died tragically in my previous life. I floated quietly in the Phoenix Hall, watching the imperial physicians helplessly tend to my unconscious body, kneeling on the ground in fear of the emperor's wrath. I also saw the emperor, who loved me deeply, staying awake all night by my side, caring for me clumsily yet tenderly, his eyes filled with unhidden sorrow. My aunt arrived and helped tuck the blanket around me. "Pearl, your father said you had a dream before entering the palace. So, that play was not the work of the Marquis of Jinyuan, was it? In your dream, did your aunt ultimately fail to protect you?" She murmured to herself, "Even I could not meet a good end." Shortly after she left, a young imperial physician finally diagnosed the cause of my unconsciousness. Poison? The emperor's expression was hard to read, but he only looked down at the physician. "What kind of poison?" "A rare poison from the southern frontier, Jingmeng." The physician leaned forward. "The empress has been poisoned for over a month." The empress had been deposed for over a month, and the Duke of Dinghua had been stationed in the southern frontier. The emperor's face flushed with anger, and he coldly laughed as he smashed the teacup. "Xiang Yang, it's you again." As he stood up, I found myself drifting behind him. He stormed off to the Jiaofeng Palace. Xiang Yang was dressed in the formal attire of a first-rank empress, sitting elegantly at her dressing table. I noticed the emperor's expression was slightly dazed, but it quickly returned to its usual coldness. "Xiang Yang, did you poison Ming Zhu?" Xiang Yang slowly put down the comb and looked at him in the mirror. "Zhao Yu, How did we end up like this? Xia Yang. I don't want to talk about this today. Give me the antidote, and I'll forgive you for everything. She began combing her long hair again. Zhao Yu. You're so deep in love yet so heartless. Is Song Mingzhu now the person you cherish most in your heart? The emperor couldn't help but lose his temper. Xia Yang. Mingzhu has always respected you. Yet you have repeatedly harmed her. How could you be so cruel? Xia Yang slammed the comb down. Cruel? Zhao Yu. You didn't say that before. You once praised me as a phoenix with a fiery temper and a hatred for evil. Now that you don't love me anymore, does that make me cruel? Yang. Take it out on me. Mingzhu is innocent. Innocent? Zhao Yu. The concubines who died at my hands were also innocent. Why didn't you call me malicious then? Xia Yang stood up. The 9 phoenixes holding pearls on her hairpin gently swayed as she walked toward the emperor, leaning close to his ear and whispering, Zhao Yu. I don't touch the innocent. But you deceived me into drinking the abortion potion on our wedding day. How can you claim innocence? The emperor was utterly shocked, his face betraying disbelief, as if he never imagined she would uncover the truth. Xia Yang suddenly pulled a dagger from her sleeve and quickly stabbed him in the lower abdomen before he could react. Her expression deranged. Zhao Yu. You killed our child. The moment the emperor was stabbed, countless fine silver threads sprouted from my limbs and quickly pulled me toward the Phoenix Hall. My shattered soul was gradually restored to its present form by the silver threads, then sank heavily back into my unconscious body. When news of the emperor's assassination reached the Phoenix Hall, I opened my eyes. While the emperor lay unconscious, the imperial physician diagnosed him as having been poisoned. By then, Xia Yang had already been imprisoned. The Dinghua Marquis title was stripped, and his entire family was exiled to a harsh, cold region. I carried a bottle of wine to see Xia Yang one last time. I will never be Empress Zhao Yu, nor will I be the Empress Dowager. Xia Yang, even if you are deposed, you are still his only empress. Xia Yang straightened her waist and drank the wine I poured for her in one gulp, her eyes reddening. I was always his empress. Song Mingzhu. If it weren't for you, I would have always been his empress. I looked at her and smiled. No. Once you know the truth about the abortion potion, you will eventually torment each other. Sometimes, love alone is not enough, especially when the two parties are not on equal footing. The two of them were destined to become a couple of bitter enemies. Xia Yang. I once saw you in the inner chambers. Tears welled up in my eyes as my thoughts drifted back to a distant past. Xia Yang looked at me in confusion, and I continued. That year, you appeared at the White Horse Temple dressed in blue and white men's clothing, looking like a strikingly handsome young man. In the cherry blossom rain swirling before the temple, you caught a girl who had fallen from a cherry blossom tree. At that moment, you were just like her light. But later, it was that very light that dragged her into a hell without daylight. Xia Yang looked at me in a daze, a look of understanding in her eyes. I asked her, how did the once passionate and fiery Xia Yang, who wanted to fight enemies at the border, become like this? I didn't wait for her answer. Perhaps even she herself couldn't say why. I put away the wine flask and left. Glancing back at her, you don't need to look like you're waiting for poison to take effect. There's no poison in the wine. She looked up in surprise and couldn't help asking me, Song Mingzhu. Why? I didn't stop. Zhao Yu loves you most now. Why did you do this? She spoke calmly from behind me. The dagger I used to stab Zhao Yu wasn't poisoned. I went to see my aunt. Before she could speak, I bowed down before her. This time, I told my aunt everything that had happened in my previous life, including my death. My aunt was overcome with grief, hugging me and unable to speak, only choking out my name, Mingzhu. Mingzhu. Later, she asked me, are you really willing to give up the emperor? regardless of what happened in our past lives. He truly loves you in this life. I also asked her, do you not blame him? My aunt wiped away her tears and returned to her dignified and solemn demeanor as the Empress Dowager. After Xie Yingyang's brutal massacre of the concubines, my aunt had learned the hard way the consequences of relinquishing power. Now, the harem was once again under her iron control. She looked at me with a meaningful expression. The emperor's devotion is a good thing. I knew my aunt had her own plans, so I said no more. Besides, the emperor has been drinking my sweet soup for 3 years. His lifespan is still uncertain. This time, you must not poison yourself. Last time, I nearly couldn't save you. Of course, it wasn't poison. That year, the history books recorded only one sentence. In the 10th year of Yuanzhen, the empress was deposed and burned in the Phoenix Hall, and the emperor coughed up blood unceasingly. When my elder sister came to fetch me, I couldn't stop crying. She paused for a moment. If you really can't bear it, just go back. The emperor, despite his illness, rushed into the burning palace to save you. Several people almost couldn't hold him back. He cried out your name with a broken heart, his voice filled with tears. I couldn't bear to listen. I shook my head and said nothing. My elder sister said, he coughed up blood in the end. A lot of blood. I followed quietly behind her. After a long time, my elder sister sighed softly, sounding relieved. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. His mind is still intact. She spat angrily. Zhao Yu is simply mad. You know, he loved Xiang Yang so much before. Yet he didn't hesitate to give her an abortion potion. Because of his love and guilt, he indulged Xiang Yang in her wickedness, caring nothing for the lives of others. And now, he's fallen in love with you. This gentle knife. And he can kick Xiang Yang so hard she coughs up blood. When Xiang Yang fell to the ground, she shouldn't have called you cruel. The cruel one is clearly Zhao Yu. Let's not talk about those unlucky things anymore. My older sister silently handed me a handkerchief and muttered, our eldest sister is now a renowned landscape painter. Each of her paintings is worth a fortune. She painted a whole basketful for you. Let's sell them and use the money to buy something. Do you know what second sister is up to? She's almost been scolded to death by Auntie. She says she should be studying poetry and books, but instead she's gone off to study business. But you know what? It's actually quite profitable. She had someone bring back a lot of gems from overseas, and she wants you to pick some out when you go back. Of course. The most impressive one is me. Your third sister is now a teacher at Yuelu Academy, properly instructing over a dozen students. Ming Zhu. What about you? Do you have any dreams? I stammered in response. I want to write Peking opera plays. I write them really well.